Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last live show. Did you guys finish? Because we did.
We did it.
Oh, that was a journey.
It was.
I'm proud of all the co-hosts for either finishing or DNFing because Victoria does not like to DNF, so I'm proud of her for doing it.
Yes, go Victoria. I
Yes.
I
envy
think she's
you
the
a
only
little
one
bit.
brave enough to do that.
Yeah, we were all like, we wish. We kind of want to, but we didn't dare.
I didn't want to leave you guys hanging, and that's the only reason why I didn't.
The down part of it being on my channel is I have to read it,
Yeah.
which it was like, but I finished it.
It was a book.
It was a book, as Stephanie once said.
Yep.
Oh, yes. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have many new thoughts on this thing. It's just annoying. Although I do keep forgetting to mention that I like how they keep referring to like old games that we still play, like backgammon and Go.
Yeah.
Like that's fun, but that's nothing book related. That's just extra related.
Extra related. So, what was your final rating, Naomi? That's what I want to
2.
know. 2. Okay, me as well, and I think Christy too. I think we all rated it 2 stars.
We all rated 2 stars.
Oh my goodness, that's funny.
Okay. Victoria's here with us about why she shouldn't finish it. That's a long list.
We should just
And a short
title
list at the same time.
Let's title this live a cautionary tale. Why you shouldn't read the Tale of Genji.
I get that some people enjoy this. I just don't understand why they enjoy this. Like, let's put it that way. I don't. That's not my cup of tea.
He just walked in the house right before we went live too, so it's like he was waiting. He did ask what time it was, so yeah. Goodness.
I read one review that said it was so melancholy, and I like a melancholy book, so that's why I liked it. I was like, good for you. That's good.
I think if someone really likes poetry, that they might like it too. But I'm not a huge poetry person. Like, I like little bits of it here and there, but so much of it was interspersed that didn't add to it for me. But I think that if someone really likes poetry, that might bump up their estimation as well. Because I can see, like, I really did enjoy some of the footnotes with some of the cultural stuff, and learning about some of their customs and religious traditions and that kind of stuff, but not 1,200 pages worth. It wasn't that interesting. I'm like, if this book had been a third or a quarter of the length, it might have gotten 3 stars from me. But it's just so long and drawn out and so repetitive. We have the same situations occurring over and over again, the same language. Like, I can't even count how many times someone's pillow floated away or their sleeves were wet with dew. Or something was ephemeral. It was extremely repetitive in its language, which I was disappointed with considering how poetic everyone said it was. I'm like, but it's really repetitive.
Yeah.
And all the women were adorable when they're mad, too.
All of them. Everyone's adorable when they're mad.
Sorry.
So condescending.
It's just so, it's just like a cycle of abuse over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And it was so frustrating about that. Like, it felt like nothing, like, there were changes as in, they stopped when a woman said no. But like
some of them,
the standard of men really was low at the beginning and it didn't get much better. And I know we're looking at it through modern lenses, and I really try when I read classics to not look at it through my day and age's lens. But it's really hard to look back and be like, is this something people aspire to? Because this is not a cultural environment that we want to go back to. It was just so rough to read at points. And I was just like, I don't care. Literally, my favorite characters were the evil spirits when they took over people's bodies. My favorite character.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I get, like, if there was, I feel like definitely, like, showing how much the women were traumatized does make more of a statement than you would expect from, like, 11th, 12th century literature. You wouldn't expect to see there to be any negative effects. But there are a lot of women that, like, after they're assaulted, they're like, oh, now I'm in love. And I'm like, that, I don't think that's how that works. But, okay. That does happen pretty frequently in this book, too.
That's so true. Yeah, in this last
time.
section, Ukifune starts having feelings for Nyo after he forces himself on her. It's like, how did that happen? That would not make me fond of the man.
I guess the men just think they're that good.
Yeah.
But, spoiler alert, no.
They're not.
That's not how that works.
Yeah, no, it's so frustrating. I remember hearing one of my friends, she was a missionary in Pakistan and India for many years before coming to Canada, as like coming back home. And she was saying that over there, when they, if they attack a woman, they get to marry her. And so like they're forced, like the woman's forced into marrying them. And she's like, it's such a brilliant plan. Who would have ever thought that if you attack a woman, you get to, she's now your property. And it's like, that's what this book is like.
Yeah.
As I was reading, I was like, this is exactly what Nancy was talking about when it was like, oh yeah, oh, I can attack them. And then, oh, now they want me so bad. Now I get to have them forever.
That happens in the Bible too, where like one of David's daughters, I think, gets attacked, and then like people are trying to force the attacker to marry her. So maybe, I guess it's a form of protection for women, but it's like really grim. Nobody's like, yeah, I want to live with my attacker. Even then, I'm sure. But back then they obviously viewed it as protection for her. So
well, with the Bible, it was in like Mosaic law as to try to make men prohibit from doing that, because it's like, your consequences is now you are financially responsible for this person for the rest of their life, because now they're like,
no one's gonna marry them.
They're destitute at this point. Like no one's gonna marry them because they've already been claimed by someone, so to speak. So it was supposed to be, like you said, Christy, protection or at least like some sort of deterrent.
Yeah.
But like it is kind of awful. But it was in a society where women really didn't have any rights. It was either that or they're living on the streets once their father has passed away and they don't have a place to live. But
just was not great part of the book. I mean, I did appreciate seeing the women's side of it, because I feel like because it was written by a woman, we got to see that.
Yeah.
But that made it more infuriating in many ways.
I feel like the women's psychologies, even though some of them were like questionable at times, I feel like the women's psychologies were really well done. Like they were believable. They were so hurt, by the men, and they didn't want to be around them. They frequently hated them, and I feel like that was really well done.
So, is there any redemption for Genji? No, not for me.
A little bit for him personally. Like I feel like he started becoming a little bit less of a womanizer as the book goes on, like to where he's not pursuing women as much, at least as many new women. He does have one person that he marries towards the end of his life, but someone else kind of forced her on him. Like it wasn't his choice. He kept trying to get this person to marry his daughter to someone else repeatedly. But I don't know, like the one thing that I feel like is sort of redemptive about him is that he, unlike some of these people, he does actually like take care of the women that he sleeps with, like financially, and make sure they have a place to live and that they're taken care of. But that really seems like
that's a low bar.
Yeah, the bar is in the basement. It's not even on the first floor. So that's the only positive thing I have to say about him, honestly. And I feel like that, again, such a low bar.
And I do. Sorry, go ahead, Christy.
No, yeah, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there is a point where, like, when he marries that young girl at the end, and then she gets pregnant because she's attacked, and then he doesn't like call it out. He doesn't like discredit, just like refuse to claim the son. Like he actually like okay, I know this isn't my child, but I'm not gonna say anything. Like that's a good characteristic. But I'm like, is that really redemption for all of the bad things he's ever done?
No, it's not, especially because he thinks that his wife was being unfaithful. He didn't actually think that there was any possibility that she was assaulted. Yeah. He doesn't even consider
always
that.
assume that. They always blame the women for what is...
Even though they're assaulting women. They're like, oh, well, surely this girl who got pregnant, she wasn't assaulted. Surely that didn't happen, because that doesn't happen.
Surely it was in people's houses and forcing myself on other people. So no, there is no redemption in some regards for Genji.
There's really no redemption
like
for any of the men.
Reason, I just feel like the only reason he wasn't raping people all the way up until his death was probably because men's sex drives do slow down as they get older. But because even when somebody did catch his eye, he pursued her, even though she constantly outwitted him and said no, and like was terrified of him, and eventually escapes him. He keeps, and he's like her benefactor in a way. So it's really hard for her to be like, no, you know, he still pursues her with all of his might. The only thing is he doesn't actually take the step of raping her. But I think it's because honestly, she's able to maneuver out of it, you know? So I feel like another woman, he would have easily overcome her. So I don't think he really changed. It was just his sex drive changed.
I think you're onto something there.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact that he kidnapped an 8-year-old girl and then groomed her into being the perfect wife and then forced himself upon her and married her when his wife died, I don't think that's redeemable at all.
No.
Like that's, and then there was like it's the great love story of the book where the author's actually named after the assault victim or the victim there. It's like the fact that she is it's such a great love story. It's Stockholm syndrome. It's not a love story, and that's just too far for me.
Yeah. He might have really ended up caring about her as a human, but that is not a good start to anything.
Yeah.
Even if you grow to care about them. If you really care about someone, are you going to do that? No, you're not.
I think I could have learned everything that I wanted to learn from this classic in a Great Courses lecture series.
Yeah.
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 Like if I was listening to one about that, I think I would have learned everything I would have wanted to know culturally, significance-wise, the poetry, all those things. And I wouldn't have had to go through all of this traumatic abuse for over 1,000 pages.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would have preferred a nonfiction about this time period that was, you know, like 200 to 400 pages long, as opposed to reading a 1,200 page long book of just, and it like if we had maybe it would have been slightly redemptive, maybe not, if at the end everyone realizes like, oh, this cycle of abuse is not good. I am just being just like my father or grandfather before me, and this needs to end here. Like if there was some realization or acknowledgement of that, that might have felt a little different, but it still would have felt too drawn out. But there wasn't that, because I don't think that any of that was even considered bad or wrong in this time period. So.
Yeah.
Again, it was a Western modern lens to look at Eastern old literature objectively, but still.
Yeah, like I said, there's a place where it's like it is. Maybe I said it before we went live, anyways. Where it's like there's a part where it's important historically, but it doesn't mean it's enjoyable. And this is not enjoyable to me. No. And I feel like at least I'm the reader who, if there's a change and people are like recognize the change, I'm okay with the dark part for a while, as long as there's improvement and there's recognition. And there was really none of that. And the worst part for me in that way was that it happened over multiple generations. It wasn't just Genji, but it was also his son, right? And it was just like the way it transitioned to the next multiple generations, or continuing on, as you can imagine, it makes it so depressing to be like, these boys are growing up to be men who are like, oh, I can do whatever I want. and never even thinking about their mothers and how their mother was treated in that situation, or how they're treating another girl who could be a mother. Like they're not even thinking.
Yeah.
That's nowhere in their realm.
I do think it's interesting that the boy that's actually Genji's son is slightly more respectful to women than the one that Genji claimed but was a product of rape. But wasn't Genji's son, Neo. Like, I feel like he was way worse than Kaoru. And not that Kaoru was like great, but actually I don't think Kaoru actually fully forced himself on anyone. He kind of tarnished reputations by staying at their houses all night, but they talked. Not actually, whereas Neo was like known for being a womanizer, just like Genji, even though he wasn't actually Genji's son. Everyone thought he was, but he wasn't. I just thought that was interesting.
It's a mess, and it's not a great mess to look at. Some people like messy books, not me, not at least not this messy book.
Yeah. Did you listen to the audio for this at all, Naomi? Or did you just read it? Okay.
I mean, I put on the audio for like maybe 30 minutes, and then I was like, I need to physically read it because of all the names. Yeah, that's basically what it is, Victoria. A really sketchy love story.
A cautionary tale. A really sketchy love story. Love should be in quotation marks, though.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say with the audiobook, I texted Christy this because as I was listening to it, they just kept saying Neo's name because, he's kind of a main character in the last part of the book. And every time in my brain was like, his name is Neil. Like, Neil. That's what it sounded like when he was reading it rather than Neo. It was Neil. So I'm like, his name's Neil. That just fits. And I don't know why, but it does.
Oh, funny.
Sketchy, creepy guy named Neil. Sorry if there are any Neils watching. I don't actually know any Neils, so this is not personal experience. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I feel bad kind of because I know there are people who do actually like this book.
Yeah.
But like Naomi said, I'm not really sure why. Like it feels so long for what it is too. But yeah.
We do have another question. Oh, is Naomi frozen?
I think Naomi's frozen.
No.
She's frozen with like a really nice smile though. She doesn't look bad at all. When I freeze, I'm like
modeling. Yeah, same.
Okay. Do you think it was critiquing society at all? Oh, hopefully she'll be back.
Yes.
So Victoria, I think that it was kind of both. Because I do think that there seems to be like showing some emotional and mental repercussions for the women. And sometimes their children, how then their children are treated if they're illegitimate or different things like that. So I do think, Hi.
I was like, what is going on here? All right, we're here.
We were answering Victoria's question as to whether or not we thought this was a critique or glorification. And I was saying that I think it's a little bit of both, because I do think that there are some critiques of the behavior of what's happening. But I also think that those same men are then also described as being so beautiful and so smart and so like in touch with their emotions in such a beautiful way that I think that they're also romanticized. So I think it's a little bit of both, but I also think that when you're in a society where this is the norm, it's probably hard not to just romanticize and accept some degrees of that. But it feels like there are some critiques as well.
I feel like if you are wealthy in Heian Japan, it's equated with virtue in some way, because something in your past life gave you that nice, the money, and it's something you did something in your past life to deserve your current life. So they're viewed with a certain level of like, this is a good person if they're wealthy. But then I feel like it's interesting. It is an interesting critique of that idea, because I think Genji is overall portrayed as a negative character, like that he is not like glorified in every way. So maybe she is critiquing that idea somewhat, but they still get praised all the time. These men are praised frequently. So it's just hard. It's a little bit muddy. It's a little unclear. It's not really comfortable to read because their exploits are so detailed from their own perspective, you know? So it doesn't entirely feel like a criticism all the time. Sometimes it's specific actions they take are criticized, but like, yeah.
I feel like Genji's romanticized overall.
Yeah.
More than I feel like Genji and Kaoru are fairly romanticized the whole time. So
I kind of feel like it's a satire in the way it's like we're exposing this and we're exposing how the other people feel, but it's done in a way where it's like you can't get mad at the person. So it's still exposing the behavior. And I'm like, sometimes I wonder about women who wrote when they were not supposed to be writing. And if that was a way to kind of like protect themselves, to be like, you know, oh, we're writing this serious topic, but if it's done in the right tone, then no one's going to come after you and be like, hey, you're blaming men for attacking women. It's like, oh no, the women are asking for it, but they also don't like it. Like, still showing the evil underside. So I guess it could be, but it would probably be done with like a tongue-in-cheek way if it was a critique of society.
Yeah. I'm wondering who were the people that were reading this, because men wrote in a different language than women did. So that makes me wonder if women were her primary audience and not men. I don't know how frequently men were reading this. They could have been reading it just as much as women were, but knowing that they each wrote and read in different languages makes me wonder that.
Yeah, because it was written in Chinese, right, which was the male written language, right? At least I think that's what I had heard.
I thought she wrote in the language that she was supposed to write in, but the women
she wrote the opposite. That's why it was so controversial.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Then I had that mixed up in my head. I had it backwards.
Yeah. But then the Empress wanted her to stay and write more stories or write more for her because the Empress liked her work.
Okay,
so I'm wrong. So it was in Japanese.
I thought it was in Japanese. I thought it was Japanese, but the men wrote in Chinese, but women weren't allowed to speak or write in Chinese. So it was written in Japanese. So that makes me wonder, like, the men obviously could still read Japanese. So were men actually reading this, or were women her primary audience? That's what I'm kind of wondering. So
well, I know the Empress played a role in her life. So
okay.
Yeah.
I could see women getting some that's exactly how it feels out of reading it.
That's what I'm wondering, if it's kind of a little bit of solidarity, but also it's supposed to feel a little bit romantic to keep the audience's attention at the same time. You know, I don't know.
And maybe that was the best they could hope for, to be honest, is it works out financially at least.
Yeah. I think that when you're in those kind of societies, sometimes you don't always realize that you don't have that recognition for how bad it is, because you've never actually seen it be better. You might realize that it's not great, but if you don't have an example of things being a lot better, I don't know.
I would be afraid of people taking this text and wanting to be like, this is a really good way to live life. But I think this is such a difficult text to read in a lot of cases that you'd have to be like a student at university or a crazy person like us who likes to read classics to pick it up in the first place.
Yeah. And I know that people who live in Japan, that this is commonly studied there, but they have a lot more resources to help them with the text than we do. There's not very many in English to help us out. So that's a whole nother thing, that maybe there's other layers and nuance and context that we're missing because we just don't have those resources. I can hope that.
I bet if we were reading portions of it in the context of a classroom environment where you're also reading about the history and the culture and maybe even listening to recreations of the music. And, I can imagine it being a much more positive experience when you don't just have to sit and read the 1,300 pages without a lot of context.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. And I know that like we're all just reading it for the fun of reading it, which isn't a great reason when we don't love it. But I feel like having some context ingrained in us, or having someone walk us through it, would have been like made it more enjoyable as a whole book. So if we were like, I feel like if we were reading it with someone who had studied this book or who knew all those cultural elements and like who could tell us about these things, I feel like we would have enjoyed it a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Instead of just muddling our way through it.
Probably. Yeah. Although I do feel like if you are going to try to muddle your way through it, get this edition, because it does have a lot of like context in terms of like historical, cultural, and religious things in the footnotes and in the illustrations. So I do think that this does help with that, but there's still so much context that we're missing as like modern Western Americans that we just don't have with that culture in general. But if you're gonna try, I recommend that edition.
I agree. And I liked that like each chapter had an explanation of why the title was chosen, and then also the characters that they were involved, how they were related to each other, how old they were. So it wasn't like I was walking into a new chapter and seeing 5 new faces and didn't know who they were.
Yeah.
Like that
or
was
the title changes. It included the title changes. So like, okay, well now this person's commander of the left, it's this person. Even though he's referred to as commander of the left the whole time, he's this person's son, he's this person. And that was really, really helpful. So yeah.
So it's a great addition. But I would say if you're going to read Tale of Genji, go abridged.
Agreed.
Yeah,
10,000% agreed. It's a lot. It's a lot. It is even, I feel like even if I knew more about it, I think I still would have felt it was entirely too long and drawn out. Because it is.
Yeah.
There are very
so much of the same.
Yeah. There are very few classics that I feel like are worth 1,200 pages. 800 maybe. 1,200's a lot.
Yeah, this is not a common classic, I think. I feel like people don't know it unless you're from Asia area. Like, visiting there or living there, like, you wouldn't know.
Or if you're like, I feel like a lot of people who are really interested in Japanese culture, they know about it and they enjoy it, so.
They probably have more context than we do, because if they enjoy Japanese culture, they would know things that are ingrained or inherent in the culture that we probably don't.
Yeah.
So, I like Japanese food a lot.
It's not quite the same thing.
I know, but that's about all I know, and how Japan has affected Korea. That's about all that I really know. So, not a lot. And I've read a little bit of manga. That's all I got. So, that didn't really help me. I probably did this book an injustice by just reading it to read it with no context.
That's kind of how I feel.
Sorry,
Lady Murasaki. Something.
At least you guys were reading the edition with all the footnotes and stuff. I mostly, like 90% of it, listened to it. So I got way less of that than you guys did.
To be fair, though, I got the ebook. That's the same edition. But the ebook, it'd be like the section, and then it would be like footnote number 1. And it didn't have the footnote there. So you had to go to another section to read the footnote. And I was too lazy. So I did not read the footnotes often either.
Yeah. Well, when I switched to the audiobook, I wasn't reading the footnotes either.
But no, you genuinely had to switch to like the back of the book to read the footnote. And I'm like, do you know how I'm flipping back and forth? I just want to get this done. Like, that was my attitude, which probably did have done justice to it, but what can I say?
This edition does have the footnotes at the bottom of the page rather than having to flip to the end. So that's another positive for it.
Yeah. The ebook, not so great, because that was this edition with that, so.
Well, can't have it all, I guess. But I think we lost every single person that started out this book with us too.
We did.
Every single one. No one that was here at the beginning is still here except us 3. Like, there was a couple people who came to some of the middle ones. Did you guys have anybody last time in the comments?
Not really. Well, we had one person who popped in at the end, but yeah, not really.
Okay, so not someone who's reading it that had thoughts to share.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Because I know we had like Anna Marie for a while, but like I haven't seen her since halfway through, and maybe she was here. Oh, Nicole's here.
Well,
Hi, Nicole.
Nicole
Did you
moved
finish it?
in the
Did
process.
you read it with us? I want to know if you actually finished it, because
I think she read it before we did, and she just wanted to pop on and talk about it. Maybe.
Yeah.
If I'm misremembering that, let me know, Nicole. But Nicole moved in the midst of all this, so you get a free pass. So don't even worry.
Absolutely.
The video that everyone was watching that came out right when our readathon started, I think inspired some people to read it. You know, so there was other people reading it at the same time, which I've been following like their updates on Goodreads and stuff. So that's about it though, unfortunately.
Okay.
That's all right.
Well, tell us, Nicole, what you thought. I think you might have enjoyed it more than us. We really struggled and didn't enjoy it at all.
Yeah, that's the general feel here. Yeah, go back and watch. We just say a lot of the same.
We complain a lot. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Because I think you might have actually liked it, if I'm remembering correctly. But I would love to know what about it you enjoyed, and if you have more context to Japanese culture than we do, because we were thinking that maybe that is part of our problem, but it also just felt really long and repetitive to us. That's the Cliff Notes version, is we got tired of the repetitive abuse and repetitive like phrases over and over again.
Do you remember my what I said the book was about at the beginning, when a boy asked me about it at work? What the book's about, and how it's about a prince who doesn't listen to people and doesn't care what they say. That just stayed true the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, because Neo's a prince and he does the same thing.
That was an accurate summary from day one.
Yeah. Who knew?
I would have hoped for a little bit of a, like, and he learned, but no. Yeah, the abuse was really hard to read.
Okay. Oh, but you focused on the nature the first time. There is a lot of beautiful nature descriptions. I'll give you that as well, with like the snow and then cherry blossoms and different things like that. But it wasn't enough to save it for me. I'm amazed you read it twice.
Good on you.
Yeah. I'm amazed. I'm so impressed, Nicole. Nicole loves her big books, though. So
I feel like there were some really good things about this book, but the fact that Genji was the celebrated main character overshadowed everything else in such a strong way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
For me.
I agree.
I do not remember what Wakame was. Wakame was.
I don't either. I just looked it up and it says it's a type of kelp.
Yeah.
I don't remember there being a lot of kelp in this.
Oh, funny.
I don't remember that being a theme. I remember like cicada shells being a really big theme.
Oh, yeah.
And different like branches and trees and like the Murasaki flower.
Yeah.
There are certain nature themes I do recognize and remember, but I don't know.
It was a beautifully written setting. Right, you could see it playing out, but the fact that you could see it playing out made the abuse so much harder to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if you were, I think you were here at the beginning, Victoria, but like the poetry is really beautiful. I'm just not a big poetry person. So unfortunately, that did not add to my experience. So.
Yeah.
Okay. If you can find it, Nicole, I would be very curious.
It was just such a big book and very consistent, the same problems, the same personalities, just having different names. So.
Yeah. Yeah, Neo feels like a young Genji.
Yeah.
He really does. Like father, like son, I guess.
That was rough.
Yeah. I'm curious about the Gossamer years now.
Suicide and like leave, like it completely leave the culture that she only knows. It's a problem. Like that is like it's like almost like a cult where you don't leave unless you can't take it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just like, I'm done.
There's a lot of women that are like that just want to be nuns. Like the grief is too much for them to bear.
Yeah.
Mono no aware.
Okay.
Yeah. Googling.
Me too. That's my favorite thing about lives is when people bring up things and I have to look it up.
Yes, especially when a book that we don't understand much of.
Yes, so I'm really glad you're here, Nicole, because I think you have more positive things to say and maybe some more context to contribute, especially since you've read it multiple times.
So
yeah, I think
apparently
it get better on the reread, but I don't want to reread it.
Powerful emotions that objects evoke in us. Okay, yeah, I do see that, like thematically of certain things that keep being brought up, or like dew. I would say dew would be like a really good example of that. Like their sleeves are wet with dew, like all the dang time. You could play like I don't drink, but you could play a drinking game with this book. Like every time someone's sleeves are wet with dew or their pillows float away, take a shot, and you'd be drunk really quick.
Or do a bingo card every time.
A bingo card, yeah, that I could actually do that. I'm
Tale
not
of
gonna go
Genji
take a
bingo.
shot. Just reminded me of that though.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it is a wonderful theme. I agree. If it's just hard to read and it's not my kind of book. That's just what I've come to.
Ephemeral is a word that's repeated over and over again, so that really goes in with that theme as well. Like they're like, all the sudden they're like, everything is ephemeral. Like that was repeated a lot. So, and I honestly, for me personally, like I didn't enjoy the repetition. Like I can see that they're trying to do a theme with it, but I just was kind of like, okay, this is a long book. I would like some more phrases. I would like a different way to say the same thing, I guess. But
yep, I think the book could have been stopped halfway through and would have been the exact same.
We could have ended when Genji died, and that would have been.
It could have been stopped 3/4 of the way through, and it would have been literally the exact same plot.
Yeah.
Like, and to me, that's not a sign of a well-crafted book. Is when it's like anywhere, it's like literally repeating the whole time. So it's like you could stop anywhere, and it would literally be like, oh, I finished all the themes, I finished all the main topics. Any new events that happened are just repeats of the same. Like that's not what I prefer as a good book.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. That, yeah, it could have been the translation. You're right, because I did just, I listened to parts of the Dennis Washburn translation and then read Royal Tyler. So there are other translations that maybe aren't as repetitive. I don't know, but both of those ones are. So that is interesting.
We talked about.
We talked about it a couple weeks ago, maybe.
Yeah,
a couple times
did.
ago.
So it wasn't when I was here, because I don't remember the power play part being.
No, but the Demon Possession would be a great book to read about that demon.
Oh yeah, but I just have never. I hadn't heard that it could have been a power play, because that would be interesting, because it's a way for them, if they're pretending to be possessed by an evil spirit, that's when the most honesty happens, is when the spirit speaks and says, hey, this is why this is happening, because you were like this and you did this and you like. So that's really interesting. Is that the only opportunity that they would have to actually speak the truth about what is happening is when it's an evil spirit? That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That would actually change how I saw a few scenes in this book. Because I think that's interesting.
Well, I feel like that was the one reoccurring character where that was like creating justice for women. So it was like, yeah, it wasn't like Murasaki who was doing the speaking when she was possessed, but it was about how she had been impacted by certain events. And so it was like this justice for women kind of evil spirit that kept coming up, even though it wasn't their own evil spirit or their own pretending to do it. And that's my favorite character, because it was literally like anytime I was interested was like, oh, someone else is possessed. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and the girl at the end, I think it's really funny. Ukafune, is that her name? I don't know if that's how you pronounce her or not. But like the fact that she's about to kill herself, and the evil spirit actually saved her life and directed her towards someone that could help her. And then she doesn't have to be around men anymore. Now she's a nun.
Yeah. We have a better book to read now, though. Nicole, thank you.
That sounds really interesting. I would read that. It's a nonfiction. I would read it. I really want a nonfiction about this time period rather than this fictional work. I think I would have preferred that. We said that earlier, Nicole. So
yeah, for sure.
I think when we were talking about it, we were thinking of it as maybe the author's form of like judgment on the male characters. Like specifically when the spirit of jealousy attacks all of Genji's women, how that seems like, you know, the author probably couldn't just come out and criticize these male characters. She probably would have been suppressed, you know, if she had done that. Because it wouldn't have been as enjoyable for the men who were keeping these things in print, you know, keeping them alive. So it seemed like the demon possession was maybe a way that she could show her own judgment on Genji's actions. And also it being a bit of realism that his behavior hurt everybody in his life, you know, later on.
Yeah.
Well, that was the only time Genji ever showed remorse, was when Murasaki died.
Actually, when his first wife died, he showed a lot of remorse.
True, but then he decided to take Murasaki, so I don't really
for
count
like
that
30 seconds. Yeah.
I think he kidnapped Murasaki before then, but that was when he realized, like, hey, my actions actually have consequences and hurt people. Was when his wife died.
I guess I meant take her. I meant to like take her as his wife.
Oh,
so
sorry.
He turned her from child to you're my wife now. Yeah. So that didn't really work for me.
Fair. Yeah. Well, it didn't work for me either, especially when she's so confused because she saw him as a father figure. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So I'm like,
I agree.
The only real remorse was after Murasaki died, when he didn't like jump into bed with another younger girl. Like that was the only time he really was like, I actually feel like I've done something wrong for at least more than a day.
It was like a whole year.
Yeah, before he died.
His
another book that we could read.
I'm fascinated by this. Actually, I Googled this when you mentioned this the first time, Nicole. That it's nonfiction. I mean, I still don't know. Like, that's another thing we were talking about earlier too, Nicole, is like when you are in this kind of society where this is just totally the norm and you recognize that something's wrong and you're kind of like writing about it, like what do you then end up thinking the solution is? Because you haven't really seen modeled for you anything more positive than what you're currently experiencing. So I'm curious to see if a nonfiction would still feel similar to this, in that like there are so many things that are normalized yet wrong. So I don't know. I don't know if it would feel similar or not. But I am intrigued.
It's probably a lot like when people come like write about their cult experience or are in cults, and then they're like, you know, it's normal for 12-year-olds to be marrying 45-year-olds. It's normal for this, like, but that's the common accepted practice, and then it takes breaking out or the government storming in and being like, this is child abuse, to be like, to bring awareness.
Yeah.
But it's probably very similar, like in our day and age, when people are just cut off from normal society.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I will say also the Gossamer Years is only 208 pages, so it's probably great. Because that was the length was another huge thing for me. I think Nicole asked like what we rated this book overall. And if I was trying to be objective, maybe I would give it a 3, but I gave it a 2 because I struggled so badly through it. And if this had been half the length or a quarter of the length, it might have reached 3 stars for me, maybe. But the length was a huge issue because it was just repetitive and long. So
yeah, I rate based on enjoyment. So I temper that enjoyment level with some like cultural significance. So that's why it's a 2. Because the enjoyment level was really not there the whole time. I had to force myself to pick it up every single time. So
me too.
In that regards, I wouldn't have even finished it had I not been doing it with everyone. But because it's somewhat culturally important, I understand that. It's got a 2.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting that in Gossamer she expresses distress. Okay. So I'm intrigued. I want to read that and A Woman's Weapon. I want to see both. Read both.
If there's anything that good that came from reading Genji, is that now we have other sources that can tell us more about the culture, which is what we wanted.
Yeah, and I did think that the cultural stuff was really interesting, but I do think that as a modern Western person, there's just a lot of things that I do not know, and there weren't that many English resources to help me.
It was interesting seeing overall what happens with Genji's character, how like after Murasaki's death, he has trouble like controlling his emotions publicly, and how that causes him like distress. Like there are interesting things that happen with the character psychologies because we see them over the course of their lifetime. So in that sense, I liked the epic feel of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still think I agree that if it had ended when Genji had died, we still could have gotten a feel of like an entire lifetime without then going on to like, and the next generation is exactly the same.
I feel like she shows how cyclical some of these behavior patterns are by showing the next generation, but also we could have learned it in a quick epilogue, or
we learn at the beginning that Genji's father was the same as him, that Genji's father was a womanizer, and that's why he went after Genji's mother, because she was so beautiful, and he just kept going after women and going after women, like what he did with Genji's mother. Then when Genji's mother passed away, then he goes for starts with an F, Fujitsu something, whatever, Genji's stepmom that he's obsessed with, and Murasaki looks like her, so then he has to marry Murasaki. But it's like it's the same thing, and then the sons do the same thing, where it's like, okay, when the girl Kaoru is in love with dies, he's like, oh, this girl looks just like her, so I want her now. And it's like the same kind of like, we didn't need a whole nother lifetime to show that, because we already had Genji's father doing that. So we already had someone that we could see that it was cyclical.
Yeah. It would have been very easy to do a shorter after Genji's death epilogue or a couple chapters just to kind of express that concern. But yeah.
I also found it hard to be then introduced to so many, like we already knew who Neo and Kaoru were, but then we've got all these other women and people around them. So it felt like I was starting over with a character list in a way. And there was a lot of people.
It was a lot. Yeah. So Nicole's going to be doing a Genji project. Very nice. I don't know if I'm ready to do that yet, but one day.
I can tell you one thing, Nicole. I will watch all your videos on it for sure. Regardless of when I get to those books, I will happily watch all your Genji videos.
Yeah. Yes. She says the problem with Murasaki is so part of her world that she's not trying to convince us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We don't have that same context.
Yeah. It's kind of like Jane Austen, where you're like, she's like, oh, obviously everyone understands what it's like to be at a ball. And you're like, we don't. But we're not the readers. So she doesn't need to explain to us these little nuances. So
yeah. But I feel like as Americans, we do have a little bit more context for a Western European thing and a Japanese thing that was 1,000 years ago.
It's very different, but it's kind of similar.
Yeah. No, it's a good analogy. Sorry, I wasn't trying to sound like I was criticizing that. I just meant it was like another degree further.
It's so true. It takes that little nuance to being like a million times.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good
this is a gender book for sure.
Yeah, actually it would be. Yeah, I think if it was like a Japanese course or gender studies in general, I think it would give it the context that it needs. That it probably deserves. That we couldn't.
And even in those classes, they probably wouldn't read the whole thing, which is probably how it's best read, in portions.
Well, I don't think she wrote it chronologically either. That's the other thing that was in that video that we talked about, the Benjamin McAvoy video, where he talked about how it was not written probably chronologically. It was like pieces here, and then people pieced it together more chronologically. So it was more serialized is probably not the right word, because it wasn't like a serial newspaper where they're waiting for the next installment to come, but it would have been another piece of the story. And so that's another thing, that people weren't sitting down to read a 1,200-page book. They were getting a story here and a story there, and that probably felt different too.
And I think there's something to be said for, like, if you are involved in a profession, you know all the ins and outs, you can present it exactly as it is. You don't really have a choice about living in that. And so you might not cast as much judgment on things when you're really involved in the profession. Like, my husband is in law enforcement, and he watches all these really unpleasant shows. To me, they seem like really unpleasant, but he has to live there at work, 5 days a week. So for him, it's just like, it's part of the job. For him, it's like, yeah. So I guess you would view it from a different perspective if that was your life experience than if we're reading it for fun. It's a very different experience.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah. You would probably need to read a lot of the book to understand the impact of it. But I think a lot of it could also be condensed in a course material.
Mm-hmm.
Like, read more if you want to, but this is how the story goes kind of teacher. But yeah, I don't know about the abridged version. They'd probably they'd probably end it right after Genji dies or earlier. I can't imagine they'd go on.
So Christy, I know she started reading. There was a manga adaptation of Tale of Genji, and I correct me if I'm wrong, Christy, but I feel like you had a pretty volatile reaction to that. Like,
that was even worse than the book.
Yeah, and it was very condensed, because the manga was like, what, 200 pages or something?
Yeah, So the reason I read Genji with the perspective that I did, that this is mostly praising the male characters, is because that manga introduced itself by saying the fun of this book is reading the repeated seductions was the word they used. That's the fun of the book, how Genji seduces all the women. And to me, that was not fun. Yeah, they were like, that's what's enjoyable. That's what's interesting. It's like, these were not seductions. That's not the right word to use for the situation.
Thank you for encouraging rape culture.
Yeah.
Well, I can understand, like, she does talk about, like, the author talks about that kind of stuff sometimes, where she's like, oh, he was so romantic and so beautiful, and women couldn't help but fall for him. But, like, for a modern adaptation of something to say, this is the fun of this book, is extremely problematic. Like, Lady Murasaki gets a little bit of a pass because a lot of a pass, because she's living in this culture, writing in this culture. But for a modern person to say that, it's really bad. Really bad.
It wasn't great.
No, that does not sound like something I'd want to pick up.
And the Tale of Genji has decent ratings on Goodreads. The manga had terrible ratings on Goodreads.
I didn't even look at the ratings of that.
Yeah,
at least they see that.
Yeah. Most of the people reading it were like, no? I would say the book was definitely better than the manga, but it was so long that it kind of takes away any stars I would have given it for the good qualities.
Yeah.
Oh my.
What can we do? Well, do we want to talk about our next summer's book, which should be a lot more enjoyable?
Yes, let's do that.
Christy might not love it as much.
It's fine.
You don't look as excited.
It'll make me finish it. No, yeah, it'll be more enjoyable than this for sure.
So we put a poll up in the Discord. And I was just thinking we should make a Discord for the summer read along anyways, just like have a dedicated summer read along Discord.
Oh, that's a fun idea.
Okay.
So I don't know, it might just be easier to have it all in one place so Victoria doesn't have to monitor all that. Anyways, so we're reading Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, paired with The Mysteries of Udolpho. That one won the vote. I've never read The Mysteries of Udolpho, but it's been a little while since I've read Northanger Abbey, so I'm happy to reread it next year. So we'll see what months we read them in. I'm not sure. We'll have to figure that out. But it's the winner, if anyone was curious to know. Hopefully it's good. Hopefully it's a better pair.
I loved Mysteries of Udolpho. I read it 2 years ago and like loved it. It was one of my favorite books of the year. So hopefully you guys like it too. But just prepare yourself for the mystery to take a while to get to the mystery. The beginning is basically a travelogue, but it's beautiful. I think the writing's beautiful.
If we can get through Tale of Genji, we can get through a bit of a slow start.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You will like it more than Genji, I promise you. Even if you feel like it's too long, it's not 1,200 pages long. It's like 700 pages.
We'll figure out the breakdown and then we'll put it up next year. But just so you guys can get that ready on your TBRs is Northanger Abbey and The Mysteries of Udolpho. So it should be fun.
Yeah, it'll be a fun one.
Yes.
Well, I've got to head off to my niece's birthday party, but it's been lovely chatting all summer with you all.
Yes, you too. Thank you
So
for putting all this together.
Yeah.
I'm sure next year will be a little bit better, if not more.
It definitely will be. And like, there's no way it won't be. Even if it's not a favorite, it's still going to be better than this.
Yeah, better than Genji is all we need to say now. So
we should make stickers to put on front of books.
Okay, I know I said I had to go, but there's this funny story. My book club, we read the Hedgehog something. It's something about a hedgehog book.
The Elegance of the Hedgehog?
The Elegance of the Hedgehog. It was terrible. And I was the only one who finished it. And in our book club now, we have a scale where we're like, how bad was this book? Or how good was this book? And everyone says, was it better than the Hedgehog book? It is officially the worst book, and we use it as the worst book of possible on our scale. And now it's like, Genji's like, it's better than this. Is it worse? No, it's better. This is the bottom of the scale.
I need to know, Naomi, what's the bottom of the scale for you, Genji or the Hedgehog?
Oh, Genji. It was like 200 pages. It was like 1,000 pages more. Come on.
Okay, I was just wondering. I needed to know your personal scale.
Anyway. I've read 1-star books, but I was just like, it's just funny when a book is now officially the worst on your scale.
That's funny.
But anyways, we'll chat next summer, everyone.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for reading with us.
Yes.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.